Okay, this is Maury Miller, and I am speaking with Drexel Howard, and it is September 2nd, 2014. And so I'm going to begin just at the beginning and ask you where you were born and when.
I was born, I guess the closest thing would be Martinsville, but I was out in the country, and I'm born May the 3rd, 1927.
And who were your parents?
My dad's name was John Kerwin Howard, and my mother's name was Rosa Fay Harrell.
And what was your father's occupation?
My father was a farmer.
So you were born on the farm.
I was born on the farm.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I got one brother and one sister that are younger than I am.
Okay. And then when did you come to Marshall?
In 1952.
Why did you come to Marshall?
Well, it was one of those things where I hadn't got married my wife, and we couldn't find any work here, and I got a job in LaPorte, Indiana, on the assembly line for Alice Chalmers, and I was up for 4 years and had the opportunity to come back and go into business with my wife's father, and therefore we moved back to Marshall.
And what was that business?
He was an automobile mechanic and a dealer.
Okay. And so what kind of automobile was it?
He sold Kaiser Frazers.
Kaiser Frazers.
And that was one of the forerunner of technology that was before its time, but they were good automobiles and easy to work on. They had the common old Continental engine in them, and we had several of them around town.
Okay. Well, where did you live then when you came to Marshall?
We couldn't find a place to live in town, so we moved to the country again. We found a place south of town, about 3 miles, and rented it until we got settled and found a place in town that we could buy, and we moved back to town.
Okay, I want to go back to your growing up then. You were growing up in the country, and you had a brother and sister. Were there other kids around that you played with?
Old land, yes. We had all kinds of people in the kids in the country, and always had a big get together, and we wasn't that far apart as far as location was concerned. But we had a lot of them that we went to school with and grew up with. Yeah.
Okay. What kinds of things did you like to do?
Well, back when I was a kid, everybody had to play cowboy and Indian. And I was kind of hung around my dad then whenever we done anything, and I always thought I was helping him, and I guess it was. I was learning how to make a living anyhow back when I was a kid.
So you had chores on the farm?
Oh, yes.
What kinds of things?
Well, we had hogs and cattle and chickens, and sometimes it fell upon me to make sure that they had to feed, and one of the biggest things I had to do, I had to carry drinking water from a well, and we lived on top of a hill, and I had to keep the water bucket filled.
So that was your chore?
That was my chores.
Okay. Did your family attend church, or what kinds of things did your family like to do?
Oh, my dad would never miss church. I remember when I was a kid, we'd have to bundle up in the wagon, a team of horses, and Mom would have some warm bricks and blankets, and we'd go to church. And it was about 2 miles church from our house, so I don't remember ever missing church when in church.
Right. And there were other kids, so there were kid activities that you would do with the other kids there?
Oh, yes. There was always something to do. But back then, if we didn't have anything to do, we invented things to do.
Like what? What did you like to do?
Oh, we liked to play handy over and tag ball and snap a whip and stuff like that.
Okay. Then where did you go to school?
Well, I went to country school, and it was close to a church, And I went there till I guess I was through the 4th grade, and I changed to another country church then, and graduated from a place called Frog Pond.
Called what?
Frog Pond.
Frog Pond.
And it was appropriately named because it's kind of a marshland, and the frogs, in the spring of the year, they'd sing you tunes too while we were going to school.
Then where did you go to junior high and high school?
We didn't have anything called junior high back then, but I went to high school in Martinsville.
Okay. What were you involved in, and what kinds of things did you do in high school?
Well, I had chores to do at home, I wasn't, and I wasn't very big to play football and everything, but I liked the game, and then I'd stay and watch all the time, but I didn't have time to go out for any sports.
Okay, because you were busy at home with the farm. Okay. Well, tell me about getting together with your wife. How did that happen?
Well, it so happened that this was during World War II, and I graduated from high school, and I was just 17 years old, and I begged my mother to sign me up so I could go to the Navy, and I did, and I spent not quite 2 years in the Navy, and when I came home, I had a friend that was going with a girl, and she had a friend that they wanted me to meet, and it happened to be my wife.
Is that right? Okay, after the Navy. Where were you stationed in the Navy?
I was in the Pacific and also in the Atlantic.
And what was your job? What did you do?
We was on a supply ship, and I was in charge of what we called the fresh provision locker on the ship, and also entailed keeping records and things of meat and other products that we used on the ship, and also we could do small repairs and make supply deliveries to destroyers, and it was quite interesting.
Okay. You weren't ever in a battle though?
No, they made sure that supply ship was well protected.
No, well, sure. That makes a lot of sense. And then you lived in Marshall. You said you worked in Indiana, and then you moved to Marshall to work in an auto dealer?
And with an auto dealer, my father-in-law, and I learned some mechanical skills. I already had some, but I learned all the mechanical skills through him because he was a good teacher of that. He was one of the best known mechanics around the area at that time.
Okay. And then did you stay with that job?
Well, I did for a while till I thought something better come along, and I had an opportunity to go as a setup man and mechanic for what is now TRW, and back when we started it was a small corporation called Formalite, and they just moved it into Marshall, and I thought I wanted to do that, and it was a good move.
Okay. And then did you stick with that?
Well, I stuck with that until I had a chance to move again to another job.
And what was that?
And I was lucky enough to start to work for the Postal Service.
For what?
The Postal Service.
Oh, okay.
I got a job started out as a carrier in town, and then had an opening inside, and I moved to the inside, and so did a lot of counter work. So,
And was that the job that you kept then?
yes, I kept that until I retired.
Until you retired. And when did you retire?
I retired in 1989, and at that time I'd worked my way up to where I was postmaster. So.
Wow. Well, cool. And did you and your wife have children?
We had 3 boys and a girl.
And do they live around here yet?
Well, all of our boys live around Marshall, but my daughter found her fellow that she married and lived just north of Springfield, about 12 miles.
Well, let's talk about kind of the things that you remember. Was there a particular person or a particular event that you particularly think about now?
Well, not really. I know I always hung around with older people in the neighborhood, and I got to where I could find a job anytime. That was back when you could work for 10 cents or up to a quarter an hour, and always had made enough to make a little spending money.
Well, who would you say made a big influence in your life?
Well, I expect my mother did, because I was at the age of 7 years old, and my dad got sick and passed away, and she raised the family by herself and done a good job. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, as you think through your whole life and all the history that have happened, what historical events stand out in your mind?
I don't.
Well, I imagine the war stands out in
Well, the
your
war
mind.
stood out, but nothing really that I can remember except the snowstorms we used to have around Marshall, and sometimes it made it impossible to get to work. But
Particularly when you were a postman.
yeah, it was kind of tough then, but it was all right. By that time, we'd sold a place in town, and I bought a small farm, and we lived about, well, it was 5 miles out of town, and of course the roads were good enough that I could get to work all the time, most of the time.
As you think about all the changes that have happened during your lifetime, what conveniences or inventions do you think about that changed your life the most?
Well, when I started out doing helping her on the farm, everything with my dad and my granddad, everything was done with a horse, and we had several good teams of horses. And I remember the first time that they told me I could, if I wanted to learn to plow and drive a team, I could drive a team with a walking plow in stump ground. Now, stump ground is where they cleared the ground off, cut the timber off of it, and then you had the stumps laying around that you had to. And I had a good old team that they always, everybody else would get a point of a walking plow stuck in underneath the stump and couldn't get it loose, but this team was smarter than I was. They come up to the stump and they'd feel that extra pull, and they would quit right now. They wouldn't try.
Okay. What other inventions do you think about that have changed your life?
Well, everything has improved as far as that goes. We used to harvest everything by hand or that way, and the invention of the combine and the corn shellers and stuff like that made a big difference in the country. Because I still stuck, even though I worked the post, I was still stuck with doing some of the farming around. So.
Well, let me ask you, Drexel, if you were to talk to somebody who was not from Marshall, who was maybe from another country who was visiting, what would you tell them about Marshall and why you live here?
Well, Marshall is a nice town, and it so happened that we had the chance to do some state things for Marshall, and I forget what we called ourselves. Anyhow, we had a committee that helped keep the town upgraded and talked with the merchants and stuff to keep the buildings up. And Marshall just became one of the cleanest and well-kept towns that I think around the state.
It became one of the what?
Best kept
towns.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Drexel, I appreciate your talking with me this afternoon, and like